I am Cody Rosenblatt, Chief Technology Officer of Katalon. I'm here with Anand Bagmar, Quality Evangelist and Solution Architect at Applitools. And we're here to talk about automated testing and some of the challenges there, some of the obstacles, and how you can use both Katalon and Applitools and Katalon and Applitools together to work around those. And I'm going to switch my focus. So, just real briefly, we will talk about a couple of challenges, that are, I think, well known and often covered in industry publications. I'll start off by talking about how Katalon addresses some of those challenges. I'll hand it off to Anand. He'll talk about Applitools and how they do the same. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about how Applitools and Katalon can work together to give you even better perspective on what's working and what's maybe not working in your tests. And we will try to save some time at the end for Q&A. And as I mentioned, Thomas is joining us here on the panel. He'll be monitoring chat while we're talking. So we probably won't be able to read too much while we're doing that. But Thomas will be looking to see what people are interested in and carry that into Q&A. If you have questions, if you can use the question and answer feature in Zoom, that's great because that kind of collects it in a more organized fashion. But without any further ado, I don't think, we'll get started. Oh, and I haven't shared my screen already. Thank you, person in chat, and glad I was at least partially looking. I am now sharing my screen, and here's the first slide. Here's the agenda. Here we are to talk about some automated testing challenges. We're going to talk about three. There's some overlap, and we'll talk about that. But the first challenge is really the big one, and it's what I think everybody knows, and it encompasses a lot. And that is just that today in particular, modern software is changing all the time. With modern development pipelines, development and deployment pipelines, you may be deploying software multiple times a day. And you need to make sure it's still working. Even if you're not releasing new features, there are things changing in your designs. There are things changing in the frameworks underlying your product and other dependencies that may have effects on the functionality or the visual presentation of your software. And that's just a lot to keep up with. Those are arguably things that are happening, right? You know what changes are coming in your CI/CD pipeline, what your development teams are working on, but there are also things that happen and you don't expect them. And they're because, again, we're releasing increasingly interconnected, complicated applications. They depend on network availability, all sorts of resource availability in the cloud. Maybe you're incorporating some external JavaScript libraries off a CDN. And if that goes down, that may affect the way your application behaves and or looks. All those things are also changes, and they're unexpected, and they're tough to deal with in testing. And then the third thing is one that really probably marks web development since its inception. Well, maybe a little bit after inception when we had a couple of browsers, but that is web applications in particular don't have a lot of control over where they're getting displayed. But the same is true for mobile applications on mobile devices. Even today, when maybe we don't have to depend as much on deploying to IE as we used to, which was always a challenge to span, we still have multiple versions of Safari and Chrome. And those versions add new features, have new quirks. So that's another thing that just makes it more challenging. So with that, I'm going to start by talking a little bit about how three particular features in Katalon Studio address these challenges. And then I'll give a little bit of a demo for those, and we'll pass on to Anand. So real briefly, I think probably a lot of people on the call already know about Studio, but I'll give a brief pitch. Katalon Studio you can think of as a development environment, an integrated development environment for your test engineer. And we support API testing, mobile testing, web testing, desktop tests. We integrate with CI/CD pipelines, things like Jira and Azure DevOps for requirements and things. We integrate with lots of, we'll talk about those, browsers and devices and operating systems. And of course, we integrate with other tools like Applitools, and we'll talk about that. But the three features that I'm really going to talk about today are the three that I think we can see as being able to help us address some of this change, this rapid change that happens in applications. And those are self-healing tests, time capsule, and our support for cross-browser testing. And I'll step into each of those just for a brief intro before we go into demo. So first, self-healing tests. Self-healing tests in Katalon Studio are intended to address the issue of object locator change. Any of you working in web testing know, part of what you're doing is finding the objects that you need to interact with in the application under test, and then identifying them accurately. You may use the ID, you may use some XPath selector, you may use CSS features. But those things can change, and they often do unexpectedly. And here's an example of the kind of thing that can happen. You may have started out thinking your ID was going to be stable in your test, but over time, you get a new naming scheme from design or a new naming scheme from development. That changes, and your test fails. And what self-healing does is gives you a fallback for that. And we're going to see that in the demo. Time capsule can do much of what self-healing does, but also can help you figure out what went wrong, even when you didn't have fallbacks for it. And it will, as the name might suggest, capture that moment in time for you and let you figure out what happened. So you don't have to redo your test in order to fix it. It's a big time saver. And you can see what we'll be seeing in the demo here is an example of time capsule in action, where we've brought up a snapshot of the browser when we had a failure, and we're able to inspect the state of the fields and their locator information. And I'll talk about that more during the demo. And finally, cross-browser testing, I think, is relatively well understood. I'll show how Katalon allows you to take one test and test it easily across multiple browsers and do it quickly. So with that, we are going to pivot into a demo. So I'm going to start by showing the capture process, the recording process for Katalon. And we're going to capture a very simple use case, a simple login, the place where a lot of application testing starts. And I'm going to expand our recorder so you can see everything that's happening. I'm going to start my recording. And what you'll see happen, many people are probably familiar with this, but you'll see a browser start up. And I'm just going to interact with that. And you can see that Katalon is watching what I'm doing. I'm selecting the login. I'm moving down to the username field and filling that in, filling in the password. And if you watch the recording window over here, you can see that all happening while I'm doing that. And I'm going ahead and close. And you can see I've captured now my script. But what I'll draw your attention to is I've also captured features of the objects under test. So I've got features for the login button, for the two fields. And it's not just any one element of those, but I've captured several different ways to identify them on the page. So I've decided to use the ID because it's the most discriminatory, but I've also added some XPath information that I can use to find it if it doesn't work. So now I'm going to run my test just to confirm that it does do what I intended for it to do, which is quickly log in. And we'll see now we're automating, everything's happening, and we got a green test. That was pretty easy. Um, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to change the application. I'm going to change those IDs so that they don't match what I recorded. And I'm going to turn off for now self-healing. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. One, the easiest way is just to hit this self-healing button and disable it. And I haven't changed anything in the script. I'm just going to run it again. But I did change my application. And you'll see we're stepping through the same, same set. And we're going to bring it up. I'll get out of the way. We're logging in. But what's happened is you can see I'm paused here trying to set text into the username field. And the reason that's not working is my ID's changed. And you can see that here when I go to inspect. I'm going to take a look at, I'll need to focus on that particular field. And you'll see that what used to be, I should have shown this before, but what used to be text username is now text user. So it doesn't match the way it did. And my test has failed, as you can see here. And what I'm going to do next is now show you the crux of self-healing. And that is, I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to close my browser down and just restart. So again, there's nothing that I've changed in my original test. I'm just running it again with self-healing enabled. And you're going to get used to seeing this, but we're going to open the window again and try to log in. And what you're going to see is that same pause, because I'm still realizing that, or Studio is realizing it can't find the object that it wanted to by ID. And sorry, the software update there. But it did find some alternate. It found this XPath that it can use to identify it otherwise. It also takes a screenshot so that it can let me know what things looked like when that happened. But it did that for the username and the password field. And so now my test was green again. So it had failed under change. I re-enabled healing and it was able to run to completion, but it still paused for a long time. And so my test took longer than it should have to execute. What self-healing insights allows me to do is see what Katalon noticed. And if I think it's reasonable, and I'll say it is in this time, we're going to switch from that old locator to the new proposed locator. And I'm going to approve that change. And that'll update my objects in my repository with new locators. And again, I'm going to run this script. And again, no changes to the script, but what you're going to see this time is I've now recovered from that failure. I've adjusted to the change, and it's going to run just as fast as it did at the beginning when everything was good, because it now has a new locator in place that can, now that'll be the replacement from this point forward. So that was the summary of self-healing. We're going to look at some similar behaviors in our time capsule feature. So I'm enabling that here in our project settings. And I am going to break things again. So my application still is running with the modified IDs. I'm going to go into my object browser and I'm going to set those back to their previous values. This one was already set. And get them back to where they were when they were broken. And then that will enable me to use time capsule, because time capsule executes whenever I'm unable to find, or whenever a certain exception, one that happens when I'm trying to find a locator. So we'll see that. Everything looks good. And I'm going to run my login script again. So you're getting familiar with this by now. My window will pop up. And in contrast to some of the self-healing, this is going to break pretty quickly, right? It couldn't find what it wanted to. but it's now capturing a time capsule image of the browser. So it's captured the browser, DOM and resources, and it saved those all to a file for me. So now I can click on to fix a broken test, and I get my object spy, and I get a browser with the state of the application at that point. And what I can do now is inspect the browser when it broke and figure out what was wrong. So I can already see, and you already know, it's that ID wasn't what I expected it to be. But self-healing could address this particular case, but you can imagine other errors that might occur during your test execution that have nothing like self-healing available and that you need to make a fix for. In this case, I've identified that and I've made the change. So I'll take a little pause here. The next thing I'm going to show is how we can take one test that you've recorded and then run it across multiple browsers. The way that happens is through our test suite collection feature, which allows you to take a test case, put it into a suite. In this case, it's just going to be a one test suite, and then group a number of test suites into a collection that you may run under multiple configurations. In this case, the configuration we're going to change is the browser. So here I am creating a new test suite. It's going to be the login test suite. I'm going to drop my login test into it. And then I'm going to create a collection that will then group that test suite. Now, usually, in a real application, you'd have a more extensive test suite, but I'm keeping this simple so we can focus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag basically 3 copies of the test suite into the collection. And then I'm going to change the browser for each of them so that it can run with Safari and Firefox and then Chrome, which is our default. And once that's all set, all I have to do is hit execute to run this test suite collection. And the test that I originally recorded under Chrome at the beginning of this is going to execute across multiple browsers. And in this case, it's running browsers that are on my local workstation. But we can connect this up to any Selenium grid, your own if you're running it, to commercial grids if you work with those. And then that gives you an even broader span of versions and operating systems. And Safari just ran. There's Firefox and Chrome. It's taking a little bit longer. Safari runs the fastest because it's already started up. The others spin up new instances. But you'll see we should have run green. And I'm uploading a report to our test ops application. It's a separate webinar. We won't go into that today. But so now I got green. I know that my test runs across all these browsers. It's been updated, automatically to fix problems that occurred in its actual function. And those are 3 features, and there's more in Studio, but 3 that can really help you address sort of all the change and variability that happens in the modern environment. So with that, I will switch back over to our presentation and stop that and pass it over to Anand to talk about Applitools and what they can do.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cody. Just waiting for you to stop sharing so I can share.
There we go.
Okay. There we are. Hopefully my screen is visible.
It is good.
Great. So it's the challenges that Cody mentioned and the way Katalon addresses these challenges are something that add a lot of value to your functional execution. And while your functional automation toolset can get intelligent and help you address the evolving applications over time, there is still something missing in this approach. And let's talk about what that really is. We are all familiar with the test automation pyramid, and some people might be groaning looking at the pyramid again. But it's really important to talk about it because it really highlights all the different types of automated tests that you can do on your application in order to get fast feedback on quality of your product. You have various different types of automated tests that can be written, and NFR is also included in that. Plus, you do good exploratory testing, risk-based exploratory testing as well to add a lot of feedback for the quality of your product. But yet, all these efforts still put in, defects still escape into production. And you would see in a lot of such examples that I'm going to show, there's going to be something that you would have experienced in the different products that you use over time, at least once so far. Whether it's a banking website or a native app where across OS versions, the look and feel has changed. Whether it's social media-based applications or it is, again, banking websites, this is mobile web, it could be Spotify, it could be travel websites, it could be any other applications where between app upgrades or between OS upgrades, defects do escape into production. The sad reality of these defects is that none of your automated tests would have caught these easily. In some cases, yes, but most other cases, you would not be able to capture these in an automated fashion unless you have people really vigilant, really looking for different types of issues that might be going with the application, whether it's in different types of operating systems, devices, browsers, different viewport sizes to take care of responsive nature of applications. And it's a tough problem to solve, but that is the reality. What these examples say is that it doesn't matter what type of application you have, whether it's a B2B application or B2C application, it doesn't matter what geography you might be in, doesn't matter whether it is native or mobile web or in any browser, such type of issues do happen. The question is, why do these happen? And I've got an answer to that. Not sure if many would agree, but these issues happen because I strongly believe that our approach to testing is incorrect. Maybe I should call it incomplete instead of incorrect because we are doing a lot of correct things as well. So it's maybe incomplete more than incorrect. But the reason it is incomplete is because the approach that we take for testing, the non-automated testing, is we are treating it like a puzzle or like a game, spot the difference. Does my application look correct based on what it was expected? And given time, you would probably find out that there are so many differences. But do you really have the luxury of time in all cases? In how many situations are you saying that, no, I have to get this testing done quickly because I have a release to be done right now. I have a hotfix to be released right now. And it's challenging. It is extremely challenging to spot these kind of issues manually, especially when you're under time crunch. The other reality is our testing is not testing for such type of images. There is a lot of context that is involved about your product. The screens that you're looking at has got text, it has got images. These are responsive pages or different form factors. There is user experience to consider. There is a lot of context in the way you're looking at the screen, and in different contexts, that screen is going to behave differently. So in that case, if you look at a more realistic example, instead of that picture of a lot of items on the table, if I have this long page, and if I ask you if this was an earlier build, and now there is a new build, which I have the same pages seen on the right-hand side, tell me what type of differences you have over here. Is everything correct or not? How easy is it going to be for you to figure this out? How much time would it take for you to figure this out? And would you be able to check this in all the browsers, all responsive layouts that you support to say, yes, everything is fine on this one simple page, and then you proceed to the next page? And that's where the missing piece is going to be revealed about how you can address these challenges. And that missing piece is what we call as visual AI. How can you use the power of the computers to replicate what the human eye and brain can see and do, and take help from this information that the tool can provide you to take meaningful and quick decisions to make your product quality better? That's where Applitools comes in. We are the creators of visual AI. We are the inventors of visual AI, and we help you release quality products at a really fast pace. The Applitools platform at the core, of course, is the AI engine, which does the comparison. And I see a question, does it use pixel by pixel comparison? No, it does not. That is where visual testing fails. And we'll see in the demo why it fails over there. But at the core, at the crux of our platform is the AI engine, where we actually use the power of the computers to tell you what exactly is working for you or not. And we have got a lot of different ways how you can integrate very seamlessly into your way of working and your tech stack as well. So at this point, let's look at what does this really mean. We already saw what Koti showed as examples, how you can record tests or create tests. It could be using Katalon or any other means. But if you integrate Applitools Visual AI as part of that, and when you run those tests, what would happen is whenever you are taking visual screenshots, whenever you want to do visual validations, those results would come to the Applitools dashboard, and you can take decision on it quickly from here. So let's see a couple of examples what the Applitools platform can do for you. On my screen over here is, on the left-hand side is the baseline, which is my golden copy of sorts for this particular page, where this is taken using the layout algorithm on Windows 7 and Chrome operating system. And the next test that I have run is using Internet Explorer as a browser, but on the same operating system, same viewport size as an example. So first, let me tell you what the pixel comparison is going to do for you if you try to compare these images. What you see is the whole screen is highlighted in pink if you are trying to do pixel-based comparison on such screens. Even though this is a static screen, because each browser has its own different rendering engine, you will not be able to do any meaningful comparison if you're trying to do this, because of the different rendering engines. The way each pixel is rendered in the browser is different. Hence, comparison is, of course, going to fail. So you can see a very quick example of pixel to pixel comparison, why it just does not work, even on completely static content. However, if I use an AI algorithm over here, and in this case, I've chosen a strict algorithm from Applitools, what the strict algorithm does is it tells you whatever is different to the human eye, it is highlighting that in pink for you. So all the highlights over here, and I'm just toggling between the baseline and the screenshot that was taken, you would notice whatever is is different, appearing different to the human eye, those items are highlighted in pink over here. So now you can take a quick look at this when the test has run, and you will be able to see if these differences make sense or not. In this context, because I'm comparing one browser with the other, a strict algorithm also does not make sense to use for comparison, because I cannot control the rendering engines of each of the browsers. So in this case, if I instead use a layout algorithm, the layout algorithm ignores the content, but focuses on the structure of the page. And in this case, you notice that there is one difference highlighted in pink over here, which means that even from a structure of a page perspective, the AI engine has been able to capture this difference and tell you that here's something different that I've found. Now, in this case, this does seem like a genuine defect to me. And if I have a Jira integration, I could directly create a defect from here saying some label is missing, and I could create the defect and I could do a thumbs down. And when I do a thumbs down, at that point, the test is marked as failed. So it's a very simple workflow that allows you to take a look at that and take quick decisions. But that was a very simple example of a static page. Typically, products have got dynamic content. The content keeps changing. Here's an example of a native application. It's a finance app. And you see that using a strict algorithm, there are a lot of differences highlighted. but maybe because you do not have control over the data that is flowing into the application, these types of differences are false positives for you. So hence, if I again change this to a layout algorithm, you would notice that the number of pink region reduces drastically. And again, you are able to focus on differences that truly matter. In this case, again, it has found something that is different. It could be a label, it could be content, but the AI engine figures out there is something different over here, and you can take corrective action on that. I'll switch back to the strict mode. What if you say that, no, strict is the right algorithm for me on this particular screen? However, this small section of my page is something that I want to use a different algorithm for comparing it. So I could, in this particular case, draw a region over the area which has dynamic content, and I could mark that in the layout region. And now what I have is I have a strict based comparison for the main screen. However, for this small section, I have marked it in layout mode, and I'm using a combination of these to do the validations. This particular region that I put in layout could very well be, for example, ads that show up in the product. And ads by nature mean that it may show up or not. And if it shows up, you do not know which ad is going to show up. So your visual testing is going to go for a toss in such cases. So in that case, you could just mark that region as ignore, and you would notice that the pink region that was there inside this small region, that has disappeared. Now, this particular region has been ignored from comparison. Only the rest of the page is used for the same. There's very interesting other feature as well, which is called a floating region, where if I select a particular region and mark it as a floating region, there are two boxes drawn over here by Applitools for you. And what it means is after you adjust, you say that as long as the inner box moves between the bounds of the outer box, do not mark this region as failed. So you are allowing for dynamic layout as well within certain bounds as well, which gives you a lot of value and power to your visual validation. Let's see a few other quick examples. Here's an example of a media website where content is completely dynamic, but you see that you are having the test has been marked in green directly by Applitools because at a layout algorithm, there is no difference found. However, if I use an exact algorithm or a strict algorithm, you will see there are a lot of differences that are being highlighted over here. Now, one aspect which some might say is that maybe there's a tolerance level that could be set in your pixel comparison to make use of that way of comparing. But what is the logic of saying X% and not Y as a tolerance limit? Is there really some science behind it or not? And can you be guaranteed of no false positives escaping as a result? And the answer is a clear no when it comes to using pixel comparison with or without tolerance. So in this case, again, we see depending on the type of algorithm, you will be able to see the results accordingly. Last few examples to show over here of different use cases. Here's a case of a localization where we've got two different languages for the Facebook login screen. And using the layout algorithm, we are still able to find there are certain differences in layout over here, which are significant enough. However, if you choose a strict algorithm, again over here, the whole page will be marked in pink, or almost the whole page. The reason I'm showing these different examples is your product has got a lot of context. Your product needs a lot of data to be fed into it. Sometimes it is static data. Sometimes that data is static based on which environment you might be, or the data changes completely. Using visual testing is easy, but you need to have a strategy for how to enable visual testing and what kind of value it is going to provide for you. And that will, thinking about that is going to take you far. Last couple of things I quickly want to show you over here is we've got some interesting features called root cause analysis, where if you have enabled sending the DOM as well to Applitools when you're doing the comparison, and you click on a visual difference, we will tell you what is the difference in the DOM and CSS, which has led to this type of difference being found. So now, again, you can take this information and quickly pass it on to your UI dev who has much more information than just saying this is what the new layout looks like. But now with the DOM differences, the UI developer would be able to fix the issue much more quickly. So these are some different use cases when it comes to using visual testing and how Applitools Visual AI can add a lot of value to this execution. Applitools platform now has got more than 1 billion tests that have been executed on it. And based on that data, our AI engine is 99.49% accurate. We don't get fooled by the browser-based differences or configuration differences, where pixel comparisons can give you a lot of false positives. The visual AI will give you guarantee and a lot of assurance in making sure whatever is reported as a difference is genuinely going to be a difference for you to take action on. So not getting fooled or not having to worry about the config changes or browser updates can be a huge saving in terms of the maintenance and overhead for any team. So to summarize from a visual AI perspective, why use visual AI? It helps you focus on what is important to the user and not how the pixels are necessarily rendered. Pixel comparisons waste a lot of time and give you a lot of false positives. And that is extremely important when it comes to thinking about how visual AI can help plug the gap of the missing piece of the puzzle over there. So if we come back to our original example, what I showed you for a long page, what type of differences can visual AI show you? So in this case, if I'm doing a strict based comparison across those two pages, you would notice there are a lot of differences that are highlighted over here. However, if you inspect it closely, a lot of these differences could potentially be because of displacement as well, which means, let's say there's one particular section that in that long page, which was added or removed, but which caused the whole rest of the page content to move as well. And hence that is different to the human eye, and hence as reported by Applitools over here. But because of these displacement issues, that again can lead to a lot of false positives. And hence there is a feature which in Applitools which lets you ignore the displacement differences and lets you focus on truly what is different in the specific sections which cause the rest of the page to move. So again, notice the difference between the number of pink regions reported without displacement differences and with displacement differences. And you will be able to focus truly on what matters to your end user and take decision accordingly. So what we say is the approach, the right and evolved approach for functional and visual testing combined is use the functional testing tools to drive your application under test, to do the behavior, do the simulations, what the real user would be doing. And then use visual assertions instead of functional assertions, where you will be able to replace a lot of code that is written for asserting various expected behaviors on the page, and you let visual AI take care of those validations for you. So a single assertion, as you see from this example is the Cypress example for that matter. It does not matter. You are replacing a lot of assertion logic by replacing it with a single call to Applitools to do the check window. And that takes care of a complete functional as well as UI coverage. The self-healing feature that Koti spoke about, that adds a lot of value because now I'm just doing the action on the page and not having to worry about what if my UI is broken because that locator changed. No, self-healing let me continue with functional validation, but visual AI along with functional automation will give you the assurance, is my user experience still the same or not? And because you're removing a lot of lines of code from an assertion perspective, you don't have to worry about the locators. Hence, it does not break when the UI changes. You do not need additional coding skills to maintain the baselines. We saw how easy it was in the dashboard to do a thumbs down, or if something is as expected, I could just do a thumbs up. When I do a thumbs up, it tells Applitools that this new screenshot that was captured is now the expected behavior of this particular page. And when I go ahead and save this, that is going to update my baseline automatically. Next time I run the test, it will compare it against the new baseline. And the last point from a visual assertion perspective is you're able to validate the user experience at scale for all the supported browsers as well. And talking about scale, let's look at how the scaling really comes into picture over here as well. Applitools has a groundbreaking product which is not seen in any other product so far, and that is the ultra-fast grid. What the ultra-fast grid does for you is your test is still going to execute on any one machine, where it could be your machine, dev, QA machine, or your CI machine, does not matter. The test runs once on any supported browser. And whenever you say, I want to do a visual validation, Applitools would capture the DOM and CSS information, send it across to the ultra-fast grid, where you have already told it as part of configuration which different browsers or devices and viewport sizes you want to render the same page on. Applitools will re-render the same page for you in the ultra-fast grid and then take the visual validation for each of those. So what you get over here is test is running once, and that one visual validation is actually manifesting in this case to 8 visual validations automatically. And that is amazing because what would happen is, let's look at another example for that. In this case, I have 2 tests that I have executed. However, because I use the ultra-fast grid and I provided the grid different configurations of browsers and viewport sizes, I'm now able to automatically see the rendering for all of these different, the same test on all different browsers at viewport sizes automatically in the dashboard. So this is giving me scale execution at the speed of running a single test. And that is amazingly fast, and you get a very wide coverage. To clarify, what this means is you do not need to run your functional test, do not need to repeat the execution of the functional test on all the different supported browsers. You are just re-rendering the same page across all these browsers and getting the visual validation done. And that strategy is absolutely okay because browsers are W3C compliant. And unless your product has some browser-specific implementations, you would be rest assured that functionality, if it works correctly in one browser, will continue to work correctly in the other browsers as well. Hence, run the test functionally on one browser, do visual validation on all the other browsers, because what still remains different is the rendering engine in each browser. And you want to make sure your user experience does not get broken when such situations happen, when your users use the product on different browsers. Now, when you have run these tests, in this case, there were 2 tests which ran across a different set of browsers. And of course, the product is going to evolve. As a product evolves, what this would mean is now you have got a lot of visual differences found, and that can potentially take a lot of time to figure out what those differences are and take action on them. However, we do have another AI feature which will let you group these differences by similar, group the steps by similar differences. And once that analysis is done, you would see that 76 differences that were initially found have been grouped into different buckets of 39, 36, and 1, where you can just go through each of them, zoom in to see what the difference really is. Oh, in this case, the image logo is missing. This clearly is a defect. So I'm going to mark this defect. Logo is missing. When I mark this as a defect, I'm going to do a thumbs down. I proceed automatically to the next one, where I see that the logo has changed from a black to a green. This is not a defect because this new build has got my rebranded logo. So I'm just going to do a thumbs up. I go to the next one where I'll be able to focus on and see what that difference is over here. And I'll be able to take decision on that, right? So what we have seen is with a few clicks, we are able to take very quick decisions on the overall execution as well. And that's what allows you to scale your execution from a visual validation perspective also tremendously. Last bit which I want to talk about, which is again something very important and crucial, is we've got a feature called Contrast Advisor, where we've got a lot of tools that can be integrated at build time for doing accessibility validations. However, how is the rendering really happening in the browser? That part is still a missing piece. And we've got capabilities for Contrast Advisor in that regard, which gives you 2.0 and 2.1 WCAG standard validations, and as well level AA and AAA. where you select and you'll be able to find out, is there any difference from issue reported by contrast advisor. In this case, it's saying the actual contrast is 5.57 and expected is 7. And hence you found an opportunity while doing visual validation. You can also do contrast advising and make sure your product is accessible for the visually impaired folks as well. So I hope this gives you an insight into the different capabilities of Applitools and how it can add a lot of value and solve those 3 challenges that we are really talking about. With this, I hand it back to Koti to talk about the next piece about how Katalon Studio and Applitools can work together. Koti, over to you.
Thank you very much. And that was great. I learned a couple of things that I hadn't picked up while I was working on this demo. So those are going to be handy. And I hope everybody else got a lot of that too. I'm sure you did, because that's neat stuff. So I am now going to talk about how Katalon Studio integrates with Applitools, and as Anand suggested, how we can combine functional testing and visual testing to get both a solid foundation that the application is working, and also that it is visually consistent. And we'll look at that in the context of our integration with Applitools. And that integration is embedded in our Applitools plugin. That is available in our plugin store, and it is compatible with our Studio Enterprise Edition. And it does a couple of things. First of all, it integrates the Applitools APIs into Katalon Studio, and it gives you a configuration window where you can configure a few key elements of that integration. The one that you need is your API key. And then you can also give an application name that will help organize your test results in the Applitools environment. You can specify a default match level. Anand discussed that in some detail. And then you can also specify the grid view ports that you want to check if you're going to run across the ultrafast grid. In today's demo, I'm just going to show those validations. I'm not going to show working with the grid, but that is, part of the integration as well. Once you have that integration in Studio, you can use it both in our standard recording interface, as I showed at the beginning. So it shows up as just another keyword like the ones that are built in. So you've got check window, check element, check test object. Check test object, I'll note, is based on our test object repository. So as I noted earlier, that'll let you use an object that you recorded once and make sure you're consistent in your use of it throughout your scripts. And of course, just like you can use it in our no-code recording format, you can also use it in our scripting environment. So here you see simple use of those same keywords. In this case, I'm using check test object and then check window. So now I will flip over to a brief demo of this in action, and then I'll kind of talk about what we see. So here I have already incorporated some check window statements into that earlier login script. It's probably overkill in this case for there to be 3, but in fact, I was actually using it along the way to diagnose a problem I was having with Safari. But I've left them all in there, and it'll give us an opportunity to see Applitools and Katalon at work. So I am going to kick that off, and you'll see it underway. And you can see here, we've got the whole syntax available if you are hovering over, and that's what it looks like in script mode. And we're going to run our login script that we've become familiar with. And you'll see our browser setup. One thing you're going to notice while this is running is at each of those check window points, and it's resizing to adjust to the viewport that are defined in the setup. But anyway, at each of those check window points, it's going to effectively take a snapshot. That is what is getting sent up to Applitools. So you'll see the browser window move around and snap. That's basically what's happening there. And we're going through that process. We ran and everything was good. We were able to log in, and I set the baseline earlier. So my application baseline is stable, and this passed. Now, what I'm going to do next is I've changed one of my styles so that some stuff is going to render differently, but I haven't done anything other than I have my check window statements in there. And you can see right here, that used to be highlighted. It's really hard to see now. The same thing up here, this control that I use to, enacted login, I can, barely see it, but I should have checked out the contrast checker that Anand showed, because I suspect it would fail that. But anyway, you see that in my script, I've already gotten a failure for my first check. The others are going to fail too, due to this, style rendering change. The same thing would happen, even if I hadn't changed any of my styles, but maybe I can't load a resource because my CDN's down or something like that. That would raise, an alert to me that I need to look into that, even though my application is still functioning. So now I've gotten a failure, but I can look at this and see, oh, well, the application still, functionally did what it was supposed to, but there's something going on in the visual world. And I'm going to take a look at that. And I don't go into as much depth as Anand did, but you can see those highlights got rendered differently because of that style change. I'm going to say that's actually a problem, because I can't really view those effectively. I think people will overlook them. So I'm going to go ahead and mark those as failed. And you can see that propagated throughout my script. And again, I think, as Anand pointed out multiple times, this didn't require my checking for the existence of that style or its consistency in my functional checks. It just required my saying, check this window and make sure that it's consistent with my baseline. And there we go. I'm going to mark that failed too. And that is a simple example of how this works. Now you can go in and I showed the simple keywords that we support in recording. We have access to the broad API, both through keywords and scripting. So you can go into more depth, just checking particular elements for their rendering. That's something I don't know if that was obvious, but you can look at a window, you can look at specific parts of windows. So I think what's great about this is it gives you, 2 points of reference. Like, what does my application look like? And is that, valid or not? And what does it behave like? Which I think is a powerful capability. So that is the end of our demos for today. I hope everybody got a lot out of that. I'm going to open up a poll real quick to, if I can get in here, to get people's feedback and interest. And while we have that running, we can take some questions. I think that there were a number of questions for Applitools, because I think Thomas was able to answer a number of them for Katalon, but let's see what, it looks like.
Yeah, I've tried to answer.
Oh, good job. You're on it. Well, let's see what's left. Is there Katalon documentation out there for Applitools so I can dig in? Okay, someone already answered that behind. Does Applitools have a way to deal with content that can be randomized, yet is something you want checked and not ignored? I think that's for you, Anand.
Yes, let me read that again. Have a way of content that can be randomized in a particular area. Yes, of course. So tables is a good example of that, right? There is a table, but the content in the table can keep changing. So yes, we can use different AI algorithms. And remember the example that I showed where you can have a combination of different algorithms for a particular screen. So you could always use such combinations in the context of your page. to try and to get that validation done. So I hope that answers it.
And I didn't show it in my demo, but I had, when I was creating my baseline, there were some parts of my screen that I had walled off to ignore. And Andreing, I'll just note too that we've included both Applitools and Katalon resources. This webinar, when it's been processed, will be available on our webinar site, and you can also find upcoming webinars. You've got a link to, of course, Applitools' main website and their Test Automation University.
Great. So the next question was, I run the test in Chrome. The entire page is captured in Applitools, but in Safari, the snapshot is cropped. How can I get full page snapshot for each browser in Applitools? I would request you to connect with me. I would need to understand better how you are really running these tests. Is it as part of the ultra-fast cloud or something else? And based on that additional information, I'll definitely be able to help you out and guide you further. So request you to please connect with me. My Twitter ID is there, or look me up on LinkedIn, either way, and we can chat about that.
Yeah, and on that note, you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. I don't think I have my ID in there, but it's COTY. It's my first name, and it's pretty easy. Let's see. Another Applitools.
Yeah, so I'm a new user to Applitools. It works fine on my organization UI, but I'm facing issue in capturing iframe element page. First time it captures iframe page screenshot, but after click action on iframe, it's throwing stale element exception. Okay, functional tests are working perfectly fine. Great, so I think this might be something related with timing, because there's an aspect of when the clicks happen using the functional tool, and Applitools is capturing the DOM information after that fact. So again, this is a matter of fine tuning your visual testing, and Applitools does allow you to do a lot of fine tuning in your automation. So again, as mentioned before, please do reach out to me directly to understand this better, and we can find a solution for you. What kind of bandwidth does it take to submit all of these screenshots? Well, it really depends on the size of the page, doesn't it? If it's a simple Google search page, it's hardly anything. It's going to be super, super quick. But if it's a media website with a lot of images and high resolution images, of course, it's going to take time. That's one part of that. How big is the page that you're trying to capture and get validated? Are you doing a viewport size or a scroll and take full page as well? That adds to another dimension. The second bit is also in terms of which Applitools server are you connecting to. The free account typically connects to the public cloud, which is hosted in the US. So if you are someone who is based on the other side of the world, within a corporate network or on a low bandwidth, which is going across VPNs and firewalls, of course, you have to add to a lot of those latency for the turnaround time as well. So yeah, the bandwidth aspect is very contextual and subjective to where you are running the test from. The demo on mobile app automation would be quite useful. Cody, I think that's a sign of another webinar that we need to plan out.
Sounds like it.
But would be,
it's tough to cram it all into an hour, but yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Well, neat. Looks like we got through our questions. I hope everybody got something out of that. I know I did during the Applitools section. I learned a couple of tips that I will integrate into my future Applitools usage and demoing. And I really thank everybody for taking the time to join us this morning and evening and wherever you are in the world. It was super, super neat seeing everybody. And oh, somebody's got their hand raised. Oh, and we have one more question. I just started using Applitools and I am right now using it in deployment. Awesome. That's great, Aaron. Awesome. I think that's really neat. Oh.
Thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah, and I'm not too competent with Zoom, but if you've got your hand raised, drop a question in, contact us.
A lot of questions in the chat itself, but I don't think
okay.
Time for it.
Yeah.
So it would be great if those questions can be repeated either on Twitter or LinkedIn, or if there's some way for them to send it to us so that we can answer it for them.
Yep. And feel free to reach out to us in our forums. I think Applitools probably manages something similar with your questions. And yeah, thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe.